guys.
Hey,
Hello,
Moss.
hello.
How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you guys?
Great, great. I like your setup there, man. It's a nice mic.
Oh, that's a
Nice.
sweet. That's a sweet setup.
How's
Yeah,
that?
Yeah, but yeah.
I just set it up actually.
No, that's cool. I want one of those vocal shields. I need to get one.
It does help. I did a lot of voiceover work for the movie, and I actually did it in my last apartment in Hollywood. So this is the equipment that I used.
Mm.
Where are you staying now?
I moved to Long Beach. So
Nice.
my brother's in Long Beach, and his wife is also here. They have a condo here, and I actually just recently moved from Oregon, from Eugene. I was in Eugene for about a year and a half, and then got a job at a recording studio as a video editor just recently, or last year in December, and they were allowing me to work remotely from Oregon, but it was pressuring me to move, and eventually I got my brother to help me, and he was looking around Long Beach, so it made sense to move here. And I'm still working remotely, but at least I'm in the same county now.
Is this a twin brother?
Yes, that's
Oh,
correct.
wow.
Yeah, that's cool.
Wait,
That's
so
awesome.
did I tell you about this?
Well, I do a little diving in the shallow.
Okay. Yeah, it
What's
makes
your first
sense.
name?
His name is Boone.
Okay.
So my first name is Masa, but we have names that are nicknames or truncated from our real names. So my first full name is Masahiko, which is it's pretty typical Japanese name. And then his first name is Fumi Masa. So we share the Masa, which is a Chinese character. Consequently, it means elegance or elegant. But anyway, he has the Fumi attached to the first part of his name, and Fumi has the Chinese character for literature, which can be read as Boon as well. So Boon became Boone, as in Daniel Boone, or Pat
Nice.
Boone. And so he's stuck with Boone for pretty much his entire life.
That's awesome.
And for me, it's easy to go from Masahiko to Masa. So
Right.
mainly for, Americans or North Americans. We were in Canada for 2 years, but
Is this the symbol that
that is not the symbol.
that is not the symbol? I will
It-
take
it's-
that down
it is-
immediately.
yeah. I could send you an image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was reading a little bit about your background.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Give me the short location version, birth to now, like born where.
gosh. Okay, I
Sounds
sent
like
the
it's
Chinese
quite
character in the chat, so
Oh, sweet.
that's the character. Yeah. You want the really short version?
Oh, whatever you're
or-
comfortable with. I don't want to pry too much, but it sounds pretty interesting.
It is. Well, I think it is, but so we were born. Which ones? So we were born February 27, 1982 in Tokyo, and we spent only about 6 months there, and then moved quickly to Ann Arbor, Michigan, where my dad is an white American. My mom is a Japanese woman, and we moved to Michigan for my dad to complete his graduate studies in Ann Arbor. And so we spent a good 2.5 years in Ann Arbor.
It's a good town. I studied there for a summer.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been back since, not recently, but as a teenager. I loved it at the time. I wish I could have, claimed that part of my identity more. For some reason, because maybe I played ice hockey,
Nice.
I have an affinity for the Midwest, in particular Michigan and Minnesota, those areas. But yeah, so I wish I could have claimed that part of my identity more, but I didn't.
Is your mom a huge hockey fan?
My mom is. I mean,
Red
all
Devils.
hockey parents really have to be some sort of fans, because you wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
send your kids to like
No.
5 a.m. practice, or
No. Yeah.
you have to, in some ways, love the game in some parts. You don't have to like, completely embrace it, I guess, but it's just such a tough life, parenting a kid who plays hockey. It's expensive, it's time consuming. You have to,
Cold.
it's cold. Yeah. I mean, with all sports, I guess, but hockey, it's just a lot of equipment
And expensive, honestly. I mean,
very, very expensive. Yeah.
My mother-in-law, who's Japanese, also is a huge hockey fan. She's a big
Okay.
Red Devils fan, so
Awesome.
that's how
I love the sport.
hockey. It
Yeah,
is.
I think it's a great sport. It's a rough sport, and over the years I've suffered some injuries, but yeah, no, I love it. So anyway, yeah, Michigan for 2.5 years, and then came back to went back to Japan, and I spent a good part of my childhood there. In Osaka is where my mom's rural Osaka is where my mom's from, and spent some time there, and then I grew up in Kyoto, which is pretty much what I call my hometown. I wasn't born there. I was definitely raised there. But yeah, up until about the 6th grade. And then we moved to Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada for 2 years.
That's a beautiful city.
Yeah. I've definitely.
I've never been to Japan, but
okay.
Yeah. I want to.
I mean, Kyoto's wonderful. It's a very traditional city. A lot of temples and religious buildings. But anyway, yeah, Kyoto's pretty. Vancouver's beautiful. You're right. It's one of my favorite cities, definitely. And then so 2 years there, and then went back to Japan for about 2 years. I lived in Kyoto again. We had gone to public school in Japan until the 6th grade. Parents did, tried to do tutoring, arrange for tutors, try to get our English levels up, but we weren't really speaking it very natively. We sounded native, but our sentences were very broken. So finally, when we went to Canada, we had to switch. That's when we made our kind of a permanent switch from Japanese to English. I still obviously speak Japanese. I consider myself bilingual, but my English is a lot better. So 2 years back, when we went back to Japan, we had switched to English. So we went to international school. We didn't go to public school anymore. We had to continue our English education. Obviously, there's English education in public school, but it's not very good in Japan, at least not when I was going to school.
I would imagine that if you moved back to Japan, immersed yourself, then I mean, your Japanese would become better than your English. Do you think, or
yeah,
over time?
Yeah, I think, yeah, you're right. I think if we had continued with public school or private school that in the Japanese Ministry of Education curriculum, that we would have eventually caught up, and that our Japanese would be stronger than our English. Yeah, we could have done that. I think, though, my mom's an educator, my dad's an educator. I think they had very early on, I'm not sure if it was before we were born or right after, but they had decided that the education system in Japan was only worth it up until the 6th grade, up until the elementary school level. And then beyond that, it was better to send us to international school or school in North America.
Yeah. So was your household was your mom, was her English already well before? Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So for her background is that she majored in English literature in college.
Okay.
No, which I think, I mean, she would be able to tell you better than me, but as far as my understanding is, back then, in the 70s, to major in English, you had to be competent, but you didn't have to be like totally fluent. But she really applied herself. She did it, and then she eventually taught English. Was an English teacher, and then how she met my dad was she was an administrator at an English school in Osaka, and my dad was hired as a teacher, and she was an administrator. So obviously her English level was very good, and then as they raised us, in the household, like we spoke Japanese growing up, but then eventually we switched to English. And I think along with that, she also adapted to that. And, her English obviously is still very fluent. And, being in a household.
You never lose it. Yeah.
No, exactly. I have to say, though, because I went to international school and then, eventually to college in the States, like it's very skewed towards English in the household. So whenever I talk to my parents, it's definitely English heavy. I always tried to, when I was younger, I always tried to kind of split it, and I was doing a good job. In international school, you speak this sort of mixed language of Japanese and English, and
that's really interesting.
That sort of was like our language in the household, but eventually I think English took over.
Here's the test, though. When your mom was mad, did she yell in English or Japanese? What was her just natural state of anger?
I think it would be Japanese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do know that she could do the same in English. Maybe not the same, but she could get angry in English. Yeah.
Yeah, that's when the natural state comes out, when you're just you can't get the words out fast enough, so you just revert to whatever's.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
That's a super unique experience. I'm sure there was nobody else around you that was living that same kind of. Didn't really relate to anybody.
The very small community, the expat community who sent their kids to international school. Those were the kids that I could relate to.
In Kyoto.
It was in Osaka, because
Osaka.
The international school in Kyoto was very small, and I think it only went up to the 6th or 7th grade. And so when we went to international school, it was already in the 8th grade, and we needed to go somewhere close by, so we didn't have too many choices, but we picked the one in Osaka. So we went to Osaka International School. And I think so I could relate to kids there, and it was good. A lot of people were mixed race, like myself, my brother, expats, white kids who were born and raised in Japan, who could speak both languages. Very international crowd, a lot of Filipinos, a lot of Koreans, some Southeast Asians, some Indians. It was pretty mixed crowd, and
a lot of people that called Japan home post World War II. I mean, that's
exactly
pretty relevant.
And I think I got a very unique view of Japan, but also like a somewhat realistic view of it, because in a very specific sense, in that like a lot of Japanese people who go to public school, who do what everybody else is doing, don't necessarily see that Japan's also a pretty immigrant based community, and there's a lot of immigrants living in Japan, and I was able to see that. It wasn't realistic in the sense that international school costs a lot of money. These were for the most part pretty rich kids, and I grew up privileged for sure. And that if that's realistic for my experience, then it is, but it's not for a lot of people. And so I didn't get a I would have gotten a very different view if I got to public school beyond the 6th grade. I would have seen, I would have seen a lot more. I would have seen a lot less money. Let's just say.
Were you? May I ask, not to jump too deep in here, but were you when did video editing become a passion, or recording light on film? When was that something for you?
Yeah, so after international school, we had continued hockey. I know this seems not related, but it is. So the hockey was on our radar, and as we were, in Japan, junior high went up to the 9th grade. In the States, a lot of the states, the systems were different. Middle school ended at 8th grade, and so high school began in 9th grade. Anyway, after the 9th grade, we really wanted to take hockey to the next step. And in Japan, it wasn't very limited. You had to go up north to the island of Hokkaido or somewhere up north to be able to continue decent hockey. But even then, it wasn't very high level. So we decided to go to prep school in New Hampshire. And so we went and moved to New Hampshire, southern New Hampshire, and then continued with our studies there, and also with hockey. And then that's when
What year are we
I
talking? What year? We
this
talking?
is 1990, 1997, or 1997, I believe.
Like
Yes,
sophomore,
1997.
in 10th,
Sophomore year.
11th grade. Okay.
Sophomore year, yep. And so then when we moved to New Hampshire, there were other students who were pretty creative. And I guess there was like film equipment there. And I had always been interested in movies. One of the ways that our parents educated us in English in Japan, or tried to educate us, was through TV shows and movies. Yeah. We would get these, video cassettes, VHS tapes, and from our family members in the States, because, we could watch American TV to a certain extent, but, you can't get everything. So we got sent these tapes. And so I think naturally TV shows and movies were like part of our lives.
And I think that's pretty common. I mean, I've read many articles about that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. To further your education.
What was your movie though that stuck out?
Yeah, it's not a very kid oriented movie, but I love Top Gun. I loved actually fighter pilots, and my uncle was a fighter pilot, and so I loved airplanes, and I think that movie really encapsulated a lot of the things that I was really fascinated about with the world when I was growing up. So yeah, so Top Gun and those movies, comedies. We watched a lot of Disney movies too, just a whole bunch of stuff. But I think Top Gun definitely ranks as one of the best. Ghostbusters, Three Amigos.
Mm-hmm.
Those
Three
movies.
Amigos, yay!
Yeah,
I love
yeah. Really stupid, but really funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so I think when we went to prep school, it made sense that we'd be interested in visual images, and in particular, how you would write a movie or how you would make a movie. And so I got into it. I started writing screenplays. Prep school was really hard, so it really colored a lot of my experiences as a teen, a late teen, and eventually, actually, it was so hard that I actually decided to move back to Japan on my own. My brother stayed in prep school and graduated, but the latter part of my junior year and then senior year, I was back in international school in Japan. I was still very much involved in the creative process with film. My brother and we sort of were a team. I would write scripts or send him storyboards, and he would create projects at prep school. I didn't have equipment at the time when I was back in international school, so he was the one who made most of the movies. But I would give him ideas. So we I think naturally found a way to work with each other. So when we got to college in Western Mass, that's when we really started making movies in college. And I fortunately had a great mentor and professor who eventually became very instrumental in my going to graduate school and to film school. I also
always have to have one or two.
Yeah,
those mentors that
it helps.
Yeah.
I was also heavily into music as well, so I had
me too. Yeah.
Mentors there as well. Fortunately, it didn't really work out with music. It worked out with film, but with music, I also had some pretty hard teachers. So that also
part of the game.
It is, yeah, for sure. So I think that's when I first started really diving heavily into to film, and I moved to New York after college. For 2 years, I worked in TV. I actually worked at Nickelodeon on the on-air promo team, cutting spots and trailers and stuff.
Cool.
For the network. So I did that for 2 years. Then moved to Hawaii. Didn't really do anything film related there, but then decided at that point when I was in Hawaii to do this project, this long-term documentary.
Is Between the Tides?
That's Between Tides, yeah. And so that became my sort of life work. But it started all the way back, when I was living in Hawaii, which was in 2008, 2009. Yep, that's it. And then we started the project in 2010. But yeah, I think there's you can trace it from basically college to that. And also, in some ways relates to my own experience, even though I'm not, I'm not a part of this community per se, because I was never, born as an islander. But at the same time, I could also relate to the experiences of these islanders.
Did you find yourself like that teenage angst years, like I'm not refusing to identify as one or the other? Like, did you have any turmoil personally, like I'm an American, or what I mean?
No, that's a really important question, Justin. It's a question that I've really struggled with quite a bit over the years.
Sure.
So in certain periods, like really, really difficult. In other periods, maybe not as much on my mind. But overall, in terms of my life, it's probably one of the most important questions. I think earlier when I was growing up in Japan, I really wanted to identify as being Japanese. I was born there. I was raised there. At a certain point, I really thought I was Japanese. I really wanted just to fit in, to be just like everybody else. And then at a certain point, not quite sure when, at a certain point, I realized I couldn't. That just basically wasn't allowed. And in large part because of my physical appearance. I didn't look Japanese. Also, Japanese society is, like I was saying earlier, kids grow up, with the impression that everybody is just like themselves, or should be. It's very hard to stick out in ways that people maybe don't want you to, or don't expect you to. So, once that became clear that I couldn't fit in, I think that's when I had several crises and moments where I think I wanted to, disavow my background. And very early on, I think it's probably because of my trauma, my own trauma. I don't remember, at least in the early days, I don't really remember, but one of my best friends from, I've known her since I was like 3 or 4, four, I guess. She told me one point in kindergarten, or maybe in first grade, I had told her oh, I hate America. I don't like English. I don't remember this at all, but it stuck with me. Obviously it stuck with her. She remembers it very vividly. So I think that kind of shows you at least the early struggles I was going through. And I think, over the course of my teen years, I was in some ways making up for a lot of that turmoil that I experienced early on.
You were processing.
Absolutely.
How did you and your brother, how did it affect your brother? It sounds like you guys did, at least by high school, had kind of basically living on separate sides of the world at that point.
Yeah, no, that's another really important question. Because twins, being a twin can be really hard as well. And because the universe sort of expects a mirrored image, but we're not alike. I think for him, adapting to the immediate environments was much more it's not that it was more important. I think it was something that it was his mission to do that. And
comfortable maybe, or
yeah, maybe. And he was also more of a leader between the two of us. He took the initiatives to, you know, for instance, like it was his idea to go to prep school to continue hockey. I was like, well, I guess I'm going to go as well. But I was more or less the follower. He was more the leader. And so for him, it was much more, I think there was much more responsibility for him to sort of own up to his decisions. And so adapting to life at prep school was very significant. I think as a result, most people thought he was the American twin and I was the Japanese twin. And I don't, you know, that's a little reductionist, but I do
Have you ever heard that though? Like anybody describe you two that way?
Yeah. Many times.
Wow.
Mhm.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
He was
I
born
think
first.
he was born, he was born first. And I think, you know, it makes sense to, not just to myself, but to a lot of people that, you know,
there might be some science behind that, I think.
There probably is. And so I think he was very much more American than I was in many respects. It is a little reductionist to say that, but I think in many ways, like he fit in much better, and I didn't. But you know, the thing is, I'm the one who chose to go back to Japan in high school. Yeah. And when I did that, I think I was also embracing more of my Japanese identity. But I think at the same time, I was taking the initiative this time. It wasn't my brother. So in some sense, became a leader in that. My Japanese, obviously, you know, my Japanese got better when I got back. I was feeling more comfortable living there. I identified more with living there. I think my identity really not changed, but I think it became more, it became fuller. I felt much more comfortable in my own skin. So even when we ended up in college in the States, I think that really stuck with me. My Japanese to this day is better than my brother's. And I think to a certain degree, I feel like I want to be not necessarily both, because I think there's some people who say that, but I'm comfortable with saying I'm mixed race, or I'm a hybrid, or there are a lot of other terms. Hafu is the phoneticized
multiculturalization.
Yeah, exactly.
Multicultural.
And Hapa is the Hawaiian word. I think I'm very much embracing that sort of identity, and to be able to speak two languages comfortably is definitely a part of that. So,
and it's definitely one step ahead of the American education system as it is right now. So
for sure, for sure.
I'm trying to teach my daughter Spanish, and it's it's hard because I don't know Spanish. I mean, I grew up learning. Well, not grew up, but I went to college and studied German, and that's my second language. But nice. I don't. It's hard.
We're trying to teach our 6-year-old English, and it's
it's so hard. It's hard, and there are drawbacks to trying to teach your kids especially two languages like Japanese and English that are so incredibly different.
Yeah.
One, you need money to do that, and then two, like it's just for a very young kid, it's a lot. Depends on your kid's obviously linguistic ability, his or her cognition, ability to absorb information at that age. But I think it's also overwhelming because they could easily be like, well, what's the purpose? Kids are smart. They could sense like, well, what is needed to, for instance, like what is needed to just make friends, at school. Does this language make sense? No, it doesn't. A lot of kids go through that, like Saturday school or something, Sunday school, Saturday school, studying another language, and then eventually being like, well, I'm not interested. I want to spend my time playing with other kids during that time. Whatever the reason, it's a real big challenge. And then identity wise as well, it's like, if it's like, inhibiting you, or if it's like forcing you to do things that you don't want to do, like, I think that's why I was going through that stage early on, saying like, I don't like English, or I hate America, or whatever.
If somebody downplay it or talk trash about it, you're like instantly wanting to throw that part of you away to like, you're right, that kid's right, this is stupid, I shouldn't want to.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
And you mentioned something about playtime. Like I see
Mm-hmm.
playtime is a really big influence, at least on my 7-year-old
Yeah.
who wants to learn Spanish because she sees kids. I live in northern Colorado, so kids on the playground, a lot of them speak Spanish. That's their home language. That's what they speak at home, and
Yeah.
she wants to play with them, so she wants to learn Spanish, and that's beautiful.
That's great.
You know,
That's beautiful. Yeah. No, and it makes sense. I do wish I'm jealous because I do wish Japanese um, had the same sort of function within most societies in the United States. It doesn't. It's not a very practical language here. It's the reality. I accept it. Spanish, on the other hand, is very, very practical.
my kids know their body parts in Japanese from grandma.
Yeah.
hell
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
You need to poop in public is a lot better in Japanese than it is in English, you know, stuff like that.
awesome. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. In particular, that those kinds of words, I think are better, easier said in Japanese for sure.
I agree.
But
So your brother, you reconnected at college?
yeah, we reconnected. So we graduated from two different high schools, and we reconnected in college, a liberal arts school called Williams College in Western Massachusetts, and loved it. I was there for just 3 years. I spent my junior year abroad in England, studying in England. He stayed for all 4 years, and he played hockey for all 4 years as well. I had to quit when I went to England. I had to quit. But you know, it was a very easy decision for me. I wasn't really excelling in hockey, and so it was a good decision. So
Chance to study in another country.
yep, and not
I did
have
that in
to.
college too. I studied in Salzburg for a summer, and then I studied in southern Poland for another summer. I mean, those are experiences that you just love and you embrace for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
This was like 2000, 2004-ish era.
It's 2003 to 2004. Yeah, you're getting your years right.
Well, I'm 82, man. So
Oh yeah, that's awesome. That we're the same age.
What was the weird, like, reconnecting with your brother? What was the like pop culture thing that you were shocked that he was into at the time? You're like, I can't believe you like this. Like, what is your deal? Was he wearing weird flare Jinko jeans or into, you know?
I don't think that I was shocked. And there's a lot of cross pollination. You know, he would come back during the breaks, and you know, I would get a dose of whatever he was into. You know, throughout that time. So even though we were going to two separate schools in high school, you know, during the breaks we would reconnect, and he would send me, you know, send me stuff. You know, from the States, or bring back stuff. But I do know though that, you know, it's prep school, and I became pretty preppy, you know, quote unquote, and when I went there. But I do know that I didn't, I wanted to get away from it when I left. But it's, you know, it's a lot of formal wear, you know, a lot of bow ties and such. I do know that even to this day, his tastes in clothing, for instance, are much more expensive than mine. I don't know. I guess, you know what the difference though is, that in an international school, at least since you're born in '82, you probably understand. Like, I think the music in international school, for some reason, because I think we were all, a lot of people who went there were Asian. I think we identified more with certain musical genres like hip hop, for instance.
Oh, okay.
And it's not as if people in prep school didn't listen to that kind of music. They did. But I think sort of the relationship, how we identified with the music was different. It was a lot more, it felt like it was a lot more mainstream, you know, to not, you know, when I went to prep school and I went to Exeter, which is in southern New Hampshire, a lot of people were into, like, you know, like Led Zeppelin, or you know, older groups. But we were what?
Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath. Yeah, there was some of that. There was definitely some of that. But we were into, like, you know, I mean, you could compare, like, you know, musical you could compare a tastes here, but you know, we were into like Casey and JoJo, or you know, Blackstreet, or you know, or even like Backstreet Boys. But we were into a lot more Black music, and it just, we identified with that, or we thought that that was the ideal. So I think that there was like that was like really kind of strangely different. That was the norm. That was sort of the baseline, you know, to like those groups.
You mentioned Casey and JoJo. I have to. I love Casey and JoJo.
I do too, actually. And oh my gosh.
My brother's keeper. Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah, my other half was a huge Backstreet Boys fan, so she's she stalked them a few times as a tween or whatever.
Right.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it really is.
Gotta love it. So what was your first like project that you like got behind? It was like, this, we're going to release this, you know, I'm sure you just made stuff, but when did it, like, you decide to just, this is something?
I think it was Between Tides, but you have to understand, like, a lot of films don't get made like linearly, like, you know, that you start it and then you put it on the back burner. Sure. And then you know, so I think that's what happened with Between Tides, is that I started in 2010. That was really the first, you know, major undertaking that I did as a filmmaker. A lot of the stuff that I did in college was unreleased. I did do a thesis documentary, and that did involve quite a bit of work, and it's unreleased. It was an 87-minute documentary on my background in Japan, people like myself who were mixed race, but it remained unreleased. And, you know, it was done under the assumption that it was going to just live and die in college.
That's how I wrote my thesis. So
yeah,
I mean, honestly,
what was your thesis on?
I'm a composer, so
awesome.
Yeah, so I finished my master's, and it's in a library somewhere, and
yeah,
it'll live and die there.
at least it's a master's thesis. Yeah. For me, it was, you know, undergraduate thesis. I mean, it did have a life beyond college. It did. It was watched by some people in the expat community in Japan, but for the most part, it wasn't really seen widely. I did actually,
maybe it helped.
It did.
Yeah, get Between Tides made.
Absolutely.
In some way. Yeah.
And it provided the experience for me to do a major feature-length documentary.
Exactly.
But Between Tides really was the beginning. I did go to grad school in the time. So I started that in 2010. I went to grad school, film school or art school in 2012. Graduated in 2015. I had to do a master's thesis there, which did get released limitedly. Cool. It was a 34-minute film.
Is that It Ain't Necessarily So?
It is. It's called
Okay. It Ain't Necessarily I was going to bring this up tonight, and Gershwin is one of my favorite composers of all time. I play a lot of Gershwin, awesome. And I really want to see this film. Where can I see it?
I'll send you a link.
Please do. I'm going to throw it up here, because when I read this description on your website, I was like, oh my God, I have to watch this.
Okay, I'll send you a link.
Yeah, it looks so fun.
It is. It was fun to make, and it's for your audience. It's a film that is about jazz in the context of Japan. I cast myself in it as an English pronunciation teacher. I work with two lovely ladies who are real jazz singers. Professional singers. One who is a teacher, and plays herself as a teacher, jazz vocalist in this film, and then the student who is, I believe, she's performing now. At the time when I was doing this film, she wasn't. I don't think she was doing it for money, but I think she is now a professional singer. But anyway, it's about the muddiness, the trickiness of doing something like George Gershwin, who took inspiration from a lot of Black forms of music.
Cultural appropriation. I mean, Gershwin wrote that opera. He lived for a year in Black communities in Georgia, and absolutely, just trying to absorb it. And it took a good part of his life to write that opera, but there are questions that remain about what was appropriate about it, and I think there are questions that should be asked, honestly.
Yep. So
I said I love
think
music.
great. No, you're the right kind of audience for this film. So I'm really actually looking forward to showing this to you. And I don't mean that in a I don't mean to like, like trash people who weren't really interested in the film, or who rejected it. It was a hard film to screen. It only screened at 2 film festivals. One, it was 34 minutes, which is an unconventional length. And then 2, it was really a challenging film to make because I cast myself in it. And I think a lot of people, it straddles this line between documentary and fiction. And I think a lot of people were uncomfortable with that. But it was really my passion project. I mean, Between Tides, I was involved in for 8 years in the making of it. So in some sense, it was a very personal project, but really, for me, it ain't necessarily so as a project that's dearest to me. It's the project that really, I think, defines who I am. And in some ways, I'm the proudest. It's my proudest project. Yeah, I'll definitely show it to you. But yeah, it's a really like tricky film. It's about jazz and appropriation in the Japanese context. What do you do when you have a text that's appropriate to begin with, and then you're transposing it to a culture, to people who don't have access to that original culture.
It persisted after that too, because I mean, once everyone saw what Art Tatum and Thelonious Monk and Duke Ellington could do at the piano, like other cultures and countries picked that idiom up and started trying to appropriate it in some way. So I mean, like, where is the line is the question.
Where is the line? And I think you guys can both probably interpret this correctly, but I think you can sense that this straddling this line, or this like not finding a fine line between things, is something that I identify with wholly as a person of mixed origin, mixed race. Where does cultural appropriation begin and end, for instance, or where does one culture begin and one culture end? Where does the right of those people who live in those cultures begin and end? These are things that I've really dealt with in my entire life. Being told that I didn't have the right to talk about Japan in the way that people who weren't mixed race, or people not having the cultural references right or pat down when I was living in the States. So people question where you are from, even though you maybe speak English without an accent, or you sound like an American, but you don't behave like one, or you don't understand like one. So I think these are all themes that I've been obsessed with, you can say, my entire life. So I think this film really means a lot to me. Yeah.
Like, how did so when you were doing Between Tides, like,
I'm gonna bring in Jess real quick. Join me.
Yeah, let's have Jess come in.
She's half Japanese as well, so everything you're saying, I'm pretty sure I've heard her talk about 1,000 times. So it blows my mind to hear somebody else convey it that way. Do you believe in like the right of cultural preservation? You know what I mean? Do you think it's should be a natural right for people to be able to maintain their culture in some fashion?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it. Hi.
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 Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. Did you say your name was Jess?
My name is Jessica. Yeah.
I'm Masa.
Nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think cultural preservation is an important part of anyone's identity. I think for me, the difficulty is claiming that right, because if you're not considered to be a part of that community or that cultural group, or somebody excludes you, it becomes a lot harder to do. But I think in the American context, I think that the hardships, a lot of the hardships came in Japan, for me, living and growing up in Japan. But I think in the American communities tend to be a little bit more open about it. So even if you're part Japanese, I think you know, I think a lot of people will give you that leeway or that freedom. So, but yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question right, Justin.
No, yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
I've gotten asked a lot where I'm from or
Yeah.
like how long I've lived in America.
Yeah. Where'd you grow up?
Indiana.
Indiana.
Yeah.
What was
Indiana my whole life.
yeah. What
Most
was
small Midwestern town possible, you know what I mean? Like
where which town?
it's called Charleston, Indiana. It's like
Southern.
I think we graduated with less than 100 people in our graduating class.
Okay.
So,
Our closest big city is Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Was it I mean, being part Japanese, was it hard growing up in Indiana?
Yes, because there aren't many Asian people here at all.
Yeah. Did you yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And being in a small town too was when we moved there, they were I mean, I would just get asked, where are you from?
Yeah.
What are you mixed with?
Yeah. Did people assume that you were of a certain race or
Chinese? It was always Chinese. I was called that Chinese girl or yeah.
man.
Yeah. That can't be easy.
No.
Yeah. How did you, like, I don't know, I'm just so curious, like, how did you find ways to sort of you know, find your identity, or you know, did you do certain things? Do you I don't know.
I would just mostly identify, I'd say, with like the white kids. I just had to be like them and just not really. I didn't know a whole lot about the other side, my Japanese side, so just had to deal with it.
Yeah. And wait, did you say you now speak the language?
No.
No,
my
you don't. Okay.
My mom does, but I don't. She taught me certain things like facial features and
Right.
yeah.
I see.
But hers is really broken because she was taught English in school, so her
Right.
Japanese, she doesn't know a lot.
I'm embarrassed to ask this, but I know your mother, right? Or do I not?
I maybe, yeah. My aunt and uncle are George and Michi.
Right. And your mother's is
Kiyomi.
Kiyomi. Yeah, that's
Kiyomi,
it. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, I do know your
She's
mother.
the youngest
Yes.
of her family.
Right. And yeah, I mean, Kiyomi's at least from what I've heard from her, it seems like you know, her experience is also pretty unique. It not just the fact that she was, you know, born in Chichijima, but also like the fact that she moved specifically there. And wait, is your dad from there?
No, he is from Indiana. That's how she came.
Okay, I see.
They met in California. She was living there and he was in the Navy.
I see.
So they met there and then they came here.
I see. What was it job related that brought them to Indiana?
His family.
His family
was here, so he wanted to go back here.
I see. Okay.
I've always thought that was weird, though. She ended up with a Navy boy after dealing with the Navy situation at Chi-Chi for so long. Like,
I think that's common. I think in that generation, but I see what you're saying. Like that would be, you know, maybe something that you would want to get away from.
Right.
For sure. I mean, in the case of like Irene, who became one of the main subjects of my documentary, she had met her husband in Guam because she went to college in Guam, which is a very common path for a lot of people who, you know, grew up in Chichijima. So, you know, he was, oh geez, I'm embarrassed, but he was, yes, there she is.
Colorado Springs, cool.
Yep, they settled in Colorado Springs. Now they're just outside of Denver.
I'm in Fort Collins.
Okay, they're in Longmont, I believe.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, Fort Collins actually drove through there. I visited them in Longmont. So,
I love Fort Collins. It's a great town.
Yeah, I love Colorado in general. But anyway, like
mountains,
you know,
you gotta. I mean, you get
it's so beautiful,
Japan, right? I mean, a lot of the hiking in Japan is pretty fantastic.
It is,
from what I hear.
Yeah, but for someone growing up in Chichijima, though, being surrounded by the ocean and then settling in Colorado, it was a very for her, it was a very tough experience, not having the ocean and all that. Did Kiyomi, Jess, I'm curious, did Kiyomi ever talk about missing the ocean?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Every time we went to the beach, she would talk about how she missed waking up and seeing the ocean.
Yeah.
The smells.
The smells, the sounds. Yeah.
But she's only been back there once that I know of since I've been born. I was like 7. She took a trip there by herself, well, with her sisters.
Yeah.
But I've never been.
And you've never been. Do you want to go?
Oh, yes. I would love to.
I think all you guys should go, because it's really such quite an experience. I was very fortunate. I was very lucky to do this project. I ended up doing eight round trips in the span of 2 years between the years of 2010 and 2012, and then made trips to Guam and then to Colorado to finish up the project. But I was very fortunate to be able to go and stay for an extended period of time in the island. But I really love the place. It's in some sense very isolated and difficult to live because there's only a ferry, there's no airport, but it's so breathtakingly beautiful. I love tropical islands like that to begin with, but this one's really special. It's really, really beautiful.
700 miles south of the mainland, is that?
Yeah, 650 miles to be exact. But yeah, it's very, very far.
In the middle of nowhere.
Middle of nowhere. It's basically between, halfway between Tokyo and Guam. And it's just this one little island. There's 2 main islands among an archipelago, but where Kiyomi and the rest of the Bonin Islanders grew up, it was Chichijima, and it's very small. It's like I believe, I don't know if you guys been to Hawaii, there's an island called Niihau, which is not a very big island in Hawaii, but anyway, Niihau is 8 times the size of Chichijima. This is how small Chichijima is. You could run in a day, the circumference, in less than a day. You could drive it in like 30 minutes. It's very, very small. I definitely
a lot. When you're looking at Google Earth, you got to really start zooming in for a minute to get there. It's impressive.
I appreciate these supplements that you're putting on screen, but yeah, it's definitely well worth it. And I don't know, Jess, maybe you would feel like in some ways, I don't know, Chichijima has changed so much. I tend to idealize it, I think, to a degree that's maybe not very realistic at all. But for me, it was almost like a homecoming, being mixed race and feeling lost and feeling somewhat like I couldn't really identify with much of what Japan offered me growing up there. And then finding out about this really tiny, obscure island and seeing that there were people there who were, different from me, of course, but also very similar, people who spoke 2 languages and
colonizing like around 1830 with Americans and Polynesian.
Yeah.
I mean, and the Japanese didn't even come in there till what,
1860s. Yeah, 1860s. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I would assume that island still, as you're speaking, I mean, they still struggle with that identity, as a lot of people do.
The people who grew up during the Navy occupation did, yes. Yeah. Now it's very much a Japanese island. People who grew up there a lot of them are from the mainland, transplants, But I think, Kiyomi's generation especially struggled with that, and I could really identify with it. And, I think that's why I was so passionate about the project, is that, I could really sense the struggle with the people who I was meeting, and they were of a different generation. I'm in my late 30s. These people I was interviewing were, 30, even 30 plus years older than I was. And, we were of a different generation, yet the stories that they told me, the stories about, I don't know, like struggling with language, or, having this sort of culture shock going, marrying a GI or a Marine or a Navy person from the mainland and going and settling down in his hometown, and having to sort of completely wipe the slate clean and start over and learn what it is to be part of an American community. That all struck a chord with me. I was very, 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 I was very moved when I heard these stories, and a lot of them were about hardships. These weren't stories that were very easy to record on film.
No, I mean, it strikes me as a struggle that is, I mean, whenever anyone struggles with their personal identity, that
Absolutely.
is something that is just heartbreaking. And, from day to day, you cannot escape it. It's not something you can just put out of your mind, because you are who you are.
Yeah.
I think that's what got me so excited to see the documentary in the first place. Like,
Yeah.
Kiyomi is not the most open book in the world when it comes to discussing this time, because you can tell there was a lot of struggle there, a lot of things that she's not comfortable with even discussing. So it's I'm a curious guy, so it's natural for me to just ask questions to her, but
absolutely,
you can really quickly get to a point where you're just like, yep, she's uncomfortable, she doesn't want to,
and I think
want to know, you know what I mean? Like,
I think that goes with a lot of her generation as well. It wasn't easy doing the project. For instance, Between Tides took 8 years, mainly because I went to grad school, so there was a delay there. But it also took a long time. Part of the other reason is that it took a long time because I didn't. People weren't necessarily comfortable with speaking about their experiences.
Yeah.
So I think that made it quite a challenge to even complete the project. I think that there's certain points where I thought I wasn't going to complete it at all.
Did you have any pushback from anybody? Like,
I did.
Do this.
I did. I don't want to speak at length about it, but I did. I did get pushback by certain people. I mean, it's understandable because I'm a mixed race person. I look a lot like the Islanders, to some of them, at least. But I didn't grow up there. I'm not a Bonin Islander. I can't claim that identity. So it's like, at the end of the day, I might be someone who can understand their experiences better than a lot of other people can, especially from the Japanese mainland. But I'm still not them. And, a lot of people viewed me with, rightly so, a suspicion. Why was it that I was wanting to do this project? Was I trying to gain something up? Like, was it a personal gain? Was it monetary? There were a lot of questions being asked of me. And, the vetting process worked both ways. I was trying to find people who could be able to speak, well in front of about the experiences on screen. And they were trying to gauge me whether I was a person to be trusted with this sort of project.
From my understanding, they experienced some pretty nasty situations with the media at the time too. The Japanese media, the American media, even in Guam, from my understanding, were basically harassed at some point by.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. It's maybe not all of it, but that's part of it, is that they were used by the media on both sides, not just the Japanese media, but also the American media. Stories that were fictitious, stories that really demeaned the Islanders, nasty stuff. And, here I was in 2010 trying to do what others had been trying to do for a long time, is to document the stories. But like, why would they trust somebody from the outside? And, fortunately for me, I was just an individual. I didn't I wasn't part of NHK, or I wasn't part of, whatever huge corporation that had used them in the past. So in that sense, it made it more personable, but it was also hard because, when you are let's say you're part of the national broadcaster in Japan, NHK, if you go and say, hey, look, we're doing a story on this, can you appear? Some Islanders would view that skeptically, but some would be like, oh, it's national television. I could get myself out there if I need it for my own sort of personal reasons.
Oh, your story. So, I mean, it's also a story of support too, in some way too. I mean,
it is. My point though was that, for me, there was no outlet. Like I came as an individual. It wasn't like, oh, your thing is going to be aired on prime time at, you know, such and such time. You know, for me, it's like, oh, what are you going to do with this? It's like, well, we're going to probably show it at film festivals. You know, there wasn't, you know, there was like an uncertainty about the project. And I think, you know, it worked both ways. It worked in good ways, and it also worked in not so great ways. But yeah, anyway, going back to Kyomi's generation, I think, you know, that generation really experienced a lot of, you know, very, very bad things with the media. And so, you know, I don't blame them for not trusting anybody and not being able to speak about the experiences, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's very, very much relatable to me.
You can't attack someone's personal identity. You can't blame them for being skeptical.
Yeah. From my understanding, there was a lot of them that were sent with like assigned to naval families in Guam or various places while they went to school, and they weren't. There were a lot of them that weren't treated very well. Some were. Yeah, I've heard some pretty awful things about it, but also some pretty uplifting things too. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
I can't imagine.
I think the situation, the sponsorship situation, where they were sponsored by a military family to be able to continue their education beyond Chichijima, you know, in Guam, I think that arrangement came with a lot of things, good and bad. And we don't, in the documentary Between Ties, we don't really explore it that much. And I think I felt, though, that we spent the right amount of time. There was a lot of trickiness in terms of what we could tell and what we couldn't tell. So the documentary does give you a snippet of it, but it's not really the full story. I think some of the other kinds of hardships that people experience weren't really explored in that movie. I'd be curious to know from other islanders, you know, what their experience was like, you know, living with a stranger's family, basically, being, you know, expected to do certain chores around the house. And, you know, there must have been some real difficult situations there. I can only imagine. The one interview that I got which is with Rance Washington, or excuse me, his real formal name is Ohira. Rance Ohira, is that he thought he was being used, that it was basically a slave within the house. And it's a pretty, I think you know, for him, it's definitely a part of his experience. A lot of other islanders, I don't think, wanted to appear on camera and say that. So, you know, kudos to him for being very honest. But yeah, that's definitely one of the many experiences that people had, you know, being, you know, basically stateless, you know, being under the system, the naval system, growing up and relying on the Navy, solely relying on the Navy, and not being able to really do anything else. And then, you know, this is their ticket, right? You know, to get out of the island is to go to Guam, go to junior high and high school, and live with a Navy family, you know, and most people took that opportunity because you're not going to do anything else. You know, what are you going to do? You're going to, you know, end your education at 13 and then work as a fisherman or whatever. A lot of people thought that this was their ticket. And so they had to, you know, grit their teeth and experience a lot of difficult things to be able to.
They saw where it was changing. Everything was moving to Japanese. You know, they couldn't really write it very well. You know what I mean? They spoke English mostly, and, you know, Japanese at home from what it sounds like with parents. And that had to have been scary. Just how am I going to maintain and function in a society that's coming this way?
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. You know, I'm not. You know, I am in some ways doing the film a spokesperson for the community, but I think Justin, if you can have you know, other interesting people from Chichijima come on your show and talk about.
I would love that.
You know, that'd be great. I would definitely, you know, let me know when you do, because I'd be really interested in watching that podcast. So. And
that's kind of how it's a weird situation how I got it. Obviously, she got me into it because you know, it's her heritage. But basically 4 or 5 years ago, I was just trying to do a internet deep dive on her history to, you know, like a family tree situation.
Okay.
Stumbled upon a Chi message board from like 99, 2000, where Dr. Wick, I believe, I want to say John Wick, which may be his actual name.
It could be. I don't know his first name, but Dr. Wick, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, dentist.
Yes.
And actually, on one of the message boards, he replied to one of Jessica's cousins, Wayne, right?
I believe so, yeah.
With his phone number. And this was, a 10-year-old message on a message board with a phone number. I called that number randomly at like 10 o'clock at night. He answers the phone. He's at this time probably 75-ish. I don't know age-wise. This was probably 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't know his age, but man, he lit up like he just left the island yesterday and spent the next hour talking to me about it. He knew Kiyomi. He was at Georgia Michi's wedding. And the next thing I know, he mails me her family tree because that was a part of his job there in the Navy.
That's great.
And then getting that in the mail and seeing Jess was a direct descendant of Nathaniel Savory. Like, it's not that many generations back. Like, and I had no idea about Nathaniel Savory's involvement in the island and American ties to it. And man, it really threw me into that big rabbit hole. And that was kind of one of my questions for you. Like, at what point does a documentary what point do you feel like you just become a part of that history because you've deep dived it so much? And
I think, it depends on who you talk to, which filmmaker you talk to. I think to a certain degree, it's part of you. It has to, especially a historical documentary like the one that I did. It has to become a part of you. I think for me, though, I had a very much a personal interest because of my own background, and also it was self-funded. We got some grants from some universities, but it was pretty much a personal project, and I really wanted to get to know the islanders personally. So it was a very personal project from the get-go, and so it was very much a part of who I was. But yeah, like I was fascinated by the history. I was taken with the history when I found out about this sort of community that I never knew existed. And I think but I don't have the claim that you guys, you and Jess have, because it's part of your family. It's not really part of my family, but I kind of made it. I made it sort of part of my family. My dad obviously is the producer, one of the producers of the film, and he also went down to the island a lot. So it was part of my family as well. But yeah, like Jess, I didn't know that you were a direct descendant. Like if I had like a find where I got access to a family tree or something like that, if it was my own family, I would probably have the similar reaction. But yeah, there you go, Nathaniel Savory. He
from Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm. He's
blows
from
my mind.
Bradford, yeah, which I think Bradford is now incorporated into another municipality. I don't think it exists anymore, but yeah, that's his grave on the right there. That's the picture of his grave, and that grave is still there on the island. Yep, right there. I believe at some point, there was it might have been a recreation, so it might not be the original tombstone. I'm not sure. I can't really attest to that.
That's typical too throughout the Western world as well. So
yeah, for sure. But I mean, I can see the passion in you, Justin, and I think if you guys should you should definitely go.
Yeah, it's definitely a bucket list.
Dude, start a GoFundMe. I'll contribute
for sure.
There should be like a descendants fund or something. You know what I mean? Like a survivor, displacement type fund for this situation, because it is a displacement of American citizens, basically.
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a really good point. Yeah, I agree.
Almost like a reparation.
Funded by the American government
and the government. Yeah,
that was a recognized entity. You know what I mean?
I mean, we have a lot of municipalities and territories that aren't getting funding from the American government because we're sort of not doing our job, because we're paying billions of dollars for an F-35 jet rather than support people.
But yeah, when I randomly stumbled upon the trailer for Between Tides and saw George's face, I can't even describe to you how much my face lit up. Like it just melted my heart, man. I was like, "That's George. What's he doing?"
I reread our initial. I reread our initial Facebook exchange that we had, and I believe you had expressed that, and I think at that point it wasn't accessible, and I think you actually had, God, I felt bad, but I think you probably waited a couple of years, is that, to see the film?
Maybe, yeah, maybe a while.
Unfortunately, that's not been our strong suit with this film, is the accessibility of it. We had a 2-year run at a film festival, and now it's accessible.
Can I jump in and ask, Discovery Plus, is that a thing? Because I noticed it was linked. It might, is that, no?
No, it's available on a academic streaming site called ProQuest. But
okay, yeah, ProQuest, yeah. I know
it's
ProQuest.
only, having done a master's,
Yeah.
I'm sure you do. ProQuest is only available to educators and librarians, so it's not really accessible by the general public, and we're still working on possibly another distribution deal. So, I'll let you guys know once that becomes available.
Please do. We'll advertise it.
For sure. It's not been our strong suit, and I apologize that you had to wait that long, especially for Descendants. I really wanted this to be much more of a thing, and unfortunately, the topic is very niche to a lot of people, and so it's not widely accessible. We are actually currently trying to get this on PBS. But it's still very, very much far in the future. We don't really know if it's going to be able to happen, but we are looking to do that. So I'll let you guys know. I'll let you guys know if that actually ever happens. But I was going to say, I was going to ask, Justin and Jess, do you have kids? How many kids, if you don't mind me asking?
We have 4.
4 kids.
Yeah.
Are they at all interested in your heritage, Jess?
I've just recently been talking to them about it, and yeah, they've asked questions and they seem interested.
Yeah, I mean, a family of 4 on a 24-hour ship could be probably a nightmare. But I would, if you guys do set up a GoFundMe or whatever, however it is that you can get down to the islands, it might be well worth taking your kids as well.
A 24-hour boat ride sounds fantastic right now.
Yeah, as long as yeah. I don't know. I'm on the quarantine side of that fence. To make a bubble in a.
Yeah, I mean, I would. Yeah, sorry.
You could buy a bubble. You could buy a bubble.
I mean, yeah, right now might not be the best time to fly and to be on a ship, to be honest. But yeah, whenever it's safe, I would definitely urge you guys to go. And that generation of people that I interviewed, the Navy generation, they're getting older every year, and they're not going to be around forever. So these stories I took it upon myself to preserve them, and because there wasn't really, it was my mission to do that with a lot of things about my own life, but I felt that it was also something that I could do for the community. It maybe wasn't my right to do that, but I took it upon myself to do it. Some people, I think, I have appreciated that, which it makes me happy. At least it's there, and it's there for people to see. I think it's important also for people who aren't part of that community, particularly mainland Japan, for people to see that there is something like this that actually exists.
Well, I think someone that comes from there, you call Kyoto your hometown, someone who understands at least a sect of the culture, is able to put together a project like this and do it in an honest way, where you're not disenfranchising anyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Like me, a guy lives in Colorado, I can't do that. But
Yeah.
I believe, I mean, you need to understand something about the culture before you're able to talk about it in a responsible way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is a tricky subject for me to talk about because I am from Japan, but I'm not obviously from the island. But I did feel that these stories were going to get lost otherwise, and I'm pretty sure about that. There are academics and other people who have documented their experiences for sure, and then their stories are preserved there. And I don't want to discredit that or whatever, but a lot of this stuff is not very accessible. To do a movie, is something else. I think to record people talking on screen is a very, very special thing. And so I took it upon myself, and this is the reason why I was able to finish the project. I kept reminding myself that I am doing this to preserve history and to preserve these people, these people's stories and their culture. That's probably the limit to what I can say, because there are other sort of tricky things that I had to deal with in the process of doing that, because it's.
I mean, what's not tricky about life? I mean, there's so many like little tiny problems we have to solve and big problems all at the same time. So
for sure.
Oh, when you're on that boat ride, are you just in one room with a bunch of people?
It depends on the ticket.
Oh.
So I haven't. Okay, so I have to say that this is my experience is. But the last time I was there was 2012, so it's not recent. They've since upgraded the boat. Now, I'm not saying the boat is super nice. From what I've heard,
it's not a speedboat.
It's not a speedboat. From what I've heard, it's better than the older boat that I was in. But I don't think it's a very, it's not necessarily a super comfortable experience. The seas are very high. The waves are very high, and so it can be a pretty bumpy ride. The boat rocks left to right. When you're trying to sleep, a lot of people take drugs to be able to get rest. So it's not a comfortable experience. But to answer your question, I think if you're in the class that I was in, so which is the bottom class, you're basically in a big room or series of rooms. It's not like one big room, but you're in a pretty big room with a bunch of other people. If you upgrade your ticket to, I forget what the names are, but you can eventually get to a place where you can have your own space, your own room, or you're just with a few other people. So it depends on your ticket, but the ticket that I pay for, that the grants allowed me to pay for, was the cheapest ticket. So yeah, it wasn't very comfortable. I was scrunched up. The mats that they provide you aren't, I'm about 6 foot. A lot of Japanese people aren't this tall. So the mats that they give you are very, very, very small. And my dad, who also went down quite a few times, he's 6'3". Oh God, he suffered.
Oh.
He suffered on the boat. It was not, and so that's why you go to the bar, and they actually had a bar that served Guinness on tap. God knows why, but they did, and so he would drink a lot of alcohol. Like a lot of people would bring their own stash of alcohol, their food. It would be a giant party, and it's actually quite fun. It took 25 and a half hours when I was going there. Now they've shortened it to 24.
I'm just sharing this because I'm a nerd for topography. But so we're talking about down here is where Chichijima is, right?
Yes, that's
so right up here on the Philippine plate.
Yes, I think without it's the map of the sea. So I think it's a little east of that, I believe, but
a little east. Okay. Well, still, this is all exceptionally deep water.
Very deep. There's no continental shelf for those surfers out there. It's very good for surfing because there's no continental shelf. The waves these open ocean swells typically hit very close to shore.
And it makes for a pretty rough boat ride.
Yes, and then the whatever current that passes right there, I forget what the English name is, but it's extremely rough, can be rough. I've actually been on the seas right after or right before a typhoon, and they were about, I think, 30, 40 foot swells.
Oh,
and it was really,
scary.
really rough, like really rough.
No, thank you.
You know, a lot of like vomiting and just being very sick. Yeah.
What's the window of suggested travel? Like typhoon season is pretty long, it sounds like. What's the opportunity?
I would say, I forget when the exact typhoon season there is, but you know, by August you're in the thick of it. There was one time we stayed beyond August, and I remember regretting it. We couldn't go back because the typhoons came, and so the boats were canceled. We had to stay on the island, I think, an extra 2 weeks, something like that, because you know the boat runs up every 6 days, so basically it's once a week. So you miss one, and you get something gets canceled. You know, just have to really extend it. It's very hard on your wallet for sure if you're like staying in a hotel or like one of the inns, the many inns on the island. It can be very tough, and also you have to account for food and all that. But I would say avoid. I would think the best part is after the monsoons end. So the monsoons,
like
I believe.
Fall?
No, the monsoons, so in mainland Japan, typically the monsoons start in June or July. The monsoons are earlier because of the tropical climate or subtropical climate in Chichima. I think the monsoons typically happen in May. So I think by June you're good. So I would say June is probably your best bet to travel. And then
sounds like a northern hemisphere.
Yes. And then, you know, August is great because you have the Bon Festival, which, you know, there's a lot of dancing and celebrating. So at the beginning of August, you can have this great experience. But then if you stay too long, that's when the typhoons really start. So yeah, I would recommend June. I mean, July is great too. It's very hot in the summer and it's very humid. It's very much on par with climate in Hawaii. You know, and maybe it's a little bit cooler in the winter than Hawaii is, but it's pretty much very, very similar. So yeah.
The Bon Festival?
Yes.
How did you find yourself like
Japanese Buddhist? Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Like to me, Georgia meets you like the most heartwarming individuals ever. You know what I mean? Like how did you find yourself like not latching on to specific people and just focusing your attention on their story? You know what I mean? How did you pick and choose kind of?
I think the factor really was if they really wanted to participate or not. I think that was the main factor. And then once that happened, it's like, well, who can who is more comfortable with talking about their personal experiences, and who's comfortable in front of a camera. So I think that, you know, the vetting process there, if you could call it that, like kind of involved there. But in terms of your question of how do you not get personally attached, like it's hard for me because I did get personally attached to people.
Yeah.
And it's something
you care about the project.
Yeah, and it's something that I think a lot of journalists maybe experience, but a lot of journalists are trained or maybe they learn through work that you're not really supposed to do that. I think in my case, I didn't care. Like I didn't care if I did get attached to it, to the subjects, to the people, because I really wanted to get to know them. But it was very hard in some respects because, you know, you're asking questions and maybe some questions they're not comfortable with answering. So you have to really, gauge, I think, people's comfort levels well. And I think that's what I did a person like Irene, for instance, she was extremely comfortable. She would also been interviewed prior to my approach. my interviewing her. And so, she had some, experience. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the other people that I interviewed, Rance was the same way, Stanley was the same way, John was the same way. They were all very much comfortable in front of a camera. Rocky was the same way. I think
I want to show the rest of the cast, if you don't mind, if that's okay.
Go ahead. Yeah. I think that's how I felt comfortable, because they felt comfortable. Of course, there are certain people who were more comfortable answering certain types of questions, and other people who were, were more comfortable with a different set of questions. So you have to sort of gauge, with Stanley, for instance, he was very uncomfortable to begin, I think with the interview to begin with, but I think he opened up in the end.
Stanley strikes me as the kind of guy you hope to see always there. Like when you return to visit, you hope you see the Stanley there, still doing the same thing, like
absolutely
being Stanley. You know what I mean? He's like,
absolutely. He has a very, very, very strong personality. He knows what he likes. He knows what he doesn't like. Yeah.
Never able to leave.
Well, there's a quality about that. Like it's like an island, we used to, like seeing a neighborhood cat all the time. You return to the neighborhood, you expect to see the cat because it's part of that neighborhood. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just, they belong together. They kind of define each other almost.
Absolutely.
I get that.
Yeah.
Was Rance the same way?
Rance the same way. Rance had specific topics that he wanted to concentrate on. Mainly, I think, how unfair the situation was in Guam, for instance, like with the arrangements that the islanders had with the Navy in getting sponsorship from Navy families. He wanted to talk about that. He also wanted to talk about a lot of the hardships that he experienced on the island. Not all the teachers at the school were nice to the kids. These are things that I didn't cover. I ended up not covering in the documentary. I think I was very careful as well, because I also wanted to be fair. George is obviously a fantastic, wonderful person, and he had a very specific experience teaching the kids. George is right there, right. Yes. And so I wanted to concentrate on his experience. And so I couldn't necessarily talk about some of the bad things that Rance experienced, because it actually pertained to different teachers who weren't part of the documentary. Mm-hmm. So I had to sort of edit and cut out some of the stuff. And I think there's pent-up, there's a lot of like pent-up energy and the hardships that people experience, that they come out in very specific ways. Right. And so I wanted to sort of temper that a little bit with the positives that people were expressing.
Sure.
So I believe, in my own personal view, not in any Islanders' view, but in my own personal view, that I did the best job that I could, given the material that I was given, in portraying a fair and balanced view of the experiences on the island.
How many times have you caught yourself just hating it? Like, I'm so sick of this.
I'm already sick of it.
I understand. I completely get it.
I am sick of it, but not because I don't think the project is important. Project is very important.
You want to move on to what you're working on now and things like that, which leads to my next question. I was reading I don't know how recent the interview was, but you mentioned a few different projects that you had kind of in the works there. One was local efforts to demilitarize and decolonize Native Hawaiian spaces overridden by years of property development.
And where, like geographically?
That would be in Oahu and
okay,
in Hawaii. But I haven't totally concentrated on that project. It was one of my projects that I wanted to start right last year, right before the pandemic hit, but I haven't been able to move with the project in the way that I hoped. I still want to do it. It's just I don't think it's going to happen immediately. The project that I'm working on now, and I can't really disclose too much of it, is on Okinawa and on the military bases there. There's
I want to see that.
Yeah, it's a project in development, and I can't really talk too much about it because there's some tricky sort of legal issues here. But I have been fascinated by Okinawa in the same way that I was fascinated by Chichijima, about its American military past, about the communities that live there now, the sort of the dichotomy of the base life compared to the life outside of it, the really political, very tricky situation that exists because the bases are so unpopular among certain communities there. It's just a really fascinating place. And to begin with, Okinawa as a place itself is very, very fascinating. It has its own culture, its own language. It's very much separate from mainland Japan. So I've always been fascinated by it. And so to be able to work on a project like that would be, I'm hoping that at some point I'll be able to really green light this project and work on it full force. But for now, it's just in development. The Hawaii project.
Fun for you? Can I interject? I mean, is that development for me as a composer? That's sort of the fun part, in a way.
You're right. You're right, because the hard part comes later. The hard part comes when you're actually doing it. When you actually have to go and interview people or arrange for certain film shoots to happen.
Or marketing,
marketing, or getting the funds, because you don't have, without the funds, you don't have a project. The ideas are there in the development stages. So yeah, no, I agree. I think it's one of the funnest parts of the whole entire process, to envision what you could actually, potentially do. So I think, yeah, you're right. It's interesting, Ryan, because I think you come at it from a very similar sensibility, being a composer and all that. I have to say though that music, I just love music, and I think music, it can be, not always obviously, but it can be much more individualistic in terms of the creative process. And film, the challenges of it is like you have all these moving parts, and oftentimes you have to rely on so many other people. Obviously with Between Tides, it was very, very small project. And so to a certain degree, I was there throughout every portion of the process, or through every section of the process.
What you just said there was absolutely fantastic. I mean, you're on point. I mean, that is what it is for a filmmaker. It's the collaboration to the nth degree.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I mean, you have to have all of those things. As a composer and a musician, I have plenty of space to do whatever the hell I want to do.
Yeah. For sure. Sure.
But in the end, finding good collaborators is the key. Finding people that you can work with.
I agree. And fortunately, I had my family, including my mom and dad, who were both involved very heavily with the project. And then I had my twin brother, who was also in the latter stages very heavily involved. I had another producer in Tokyo, and as well as mentors and teachers at Cal Arts, where I went to grad school in Southern California.
I had a couple of friends graduate from Cal Arts.
Cal Arts,
yeah,
awesome. Yeah, it's a great school. I can't talk highly enough about
it's an amazing school.
There was some pretty big projects, right? Nebraska.
My brother, yes, he was. He went to UCLA for the producer program there. He graduated from there. He was involved in a production company in LA up until a few years ago. And they did some really, really big projects and you're right, Justin, including Nebraska. And he's on the producing side of things, and he's helping me a lot now with, we're doing a lot of collaboration, this project on Okinawa. He's very much involved with, and including it ain't necessarily so like I don't think he has the credit in there, but he did help me write the outline for the project. So yeah, he's been involved creatively in my life. And so it's nice to have family members to come and help you. It can be tough too because you're family and you can get angry at each other in ways that
long history together.
Yeah, exactly.
You're to hold accountable though. You know what I mean? Family's easier to keep on task than a complete stranger is, I would assume.
For sure.
I saw you mentioned another project based on a female bodybuilder, Japanese bodybuilder.
That unfortunately is not happening anymore. That is completely canceled. Yeah.
It really piqued my interest. I was like, wait a second, this is super unique, first of all.
It was a very exciting project. It was based on intellectual property that we tried to acquire, but no, that's not happening anymore. It was something that, like we really wanted to, like, female bodybuilders. I think, one of the things that my brother and I have a keen interest in is telling stories that are not typically told, and especially, it can be race oriented in the way that, my experience. That I've based a lot of things on my experience, but it could also be gender roles, and so I think anything that really sort of bucks trends, we're really interested in. Anything that sort of subverts people's understandings of
that. Those are always the greatest stories in history, though. I mean, like, if you read books, like, books change the world. If you read now films, watch films. They change the world.
Yeah, and I think there's a greater sense, maybe you guys can identify this, but like, there's a sense that there are stories out there that need to be told, and that aren't told in the mainstream, and I think that's where my sensibilities lie. I think that's why that's my mission in life, is to be able to do that. And so the between twice obviously is part of that, to be able to, preserve and discover stories that like the ones of the Bonin Islanders, and to be able to capture them and then to show them in front of people who don't know anything about that. Is extremely important. And so I think whatever we do, whether it's on Okinawa or whether it's in Hawaii or a female bodybuilder, unfortunately we can't do that, but whatever the story is, we want to approach it from that angle, that we're contributing in ways so that things that aren't shown the light do get shown in a fair justifiable way.
This may be a dumb question here, but the best way I can relate the question to make sense, like the hip hop world, I guess, you have the mixtape world where samples aren't cleared, rights aren't cleared, copyrights are just
or white label Beatle vinyl.
At what point as a filmmaker do you make that decision? Am I going to because I assume it's a nightmare to deal with the right side of it and just the legal portion of it. At what point do you go, we got to do something to clear this stuff, or we're just going to throw it up on wherever and not attempt to monetize it whatsoever? Or is that even possible in the filmmaking side to do it like a mixtape style where you don't clear anything?
That's a really important question.
I'm killing it.
Yeah, no, it's because there's a thing called fair use, which is, I'm sure in the music world, it's a thing. In the film world,
there are many exclusions, but yes, fair use. Continue.
So fair use in the film world is complicated. It's very much, fair use laws don't exist in many places around the world. America, in particular, maybe it's present in Canada as well, but it's a very special law that basically says, in the interest of sharing information and teaching the public, educating the public, you can reuse material, news sources. In my case, I did movies, Hollywood movies. When the Chichijima with the Bonin Islanders were talking about, Westerns and being influenced and, seeing images of America on screen for the first time. fair use is a tricky thing because it has to educate, and there are all these like stipulations that basically you need to present it in a way that educates the public, but not any less or any more than what you should. So
is there a religious exemption for filmmakers? Because I know for music there is. If you're creating music for worship, then you don't have to. Fair use is fair game.
that's amazing. I did not know that, so I can't answer that question. But that's
Cool.
that's amazing to hear. Actually,
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So what's the vetting process there? Do you create it and hope you stick to those kind of wide angle guidelines and hope nobody calls you out, or do you like?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely part of that. There are books on this, and there are laws that you can read, and as long as you can follow them and basically do what they're telling you you can do and can't do,
Yeah.
you should be golden. But in my case, yes, I've used copyrighted material in the name of fair use. And I'm hoping that nobody gives me a cease and desist letter. But
I mean, that's what you get, right? You get the letter, and then you cease and desist.
And you cease and desist, yes. I mean, end of story usually, because unless you're making thousands or millions of dollars, you're not going to get sued. Obviously,
the big thing though is monetizing it.
Yeah.
And how do you do that on various platforms?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very specific a discussion that I probably can't contribute too much, because I think there's like a lot of entertainment lawyers who are much more knowledgeable in this area. All I know is that under fair use, I was able to use 2 clips of Hollywood movies in my film, and to educate, to show, demonstrate what the Islanders were talking about when they talked about watching Westerns, or specific movies, like Irene mentions the movie Sayonara with Marlon Brando. In that case, I actually did show Sayonara because she mentions Sayonara. In those instances, you are allowed to sort of demonstrate what she's talking about.
You keep it under like 5 seconds or 3 seconds.
I don't think there's an exact number. I think you just need to demonstrate that what she's talking about. So in my instance, it was rather lengthy, so there could be questions asked about that. But I think I did my best to truncate, to shorten it, and to give as much as I thought I was allowed to demonstrate what she was talking about.
That's a conversation I'd love to have with that specific type of attorney, is, how even AI has changed that field, to where they're just being fed copyright infringement notifications constantly. And it seems very lucrative from their side. Also super grimy, kind of.
Yeah. And for a film like Between Tides, which, for better or for worse, it's not a huge film by any means, and it's not going to make. We didn't make it to tons, to make money. It's not going to make tons and tons of money. So,
can I ask, like, how do you? I mean, what about like Netflix? I mean, have you tried like marketing it? Because this seems like a film that would really
PBS,
right? A lot of people right now. And
we've gotten recommendations on doing it on Amazon, not necessarily Netflix, but on Amazon. But we haven't really explored it, mainly because I think we'd have to self-publish on Amazon, and there's a lot of like money and time and effort involved in that. So right now, I'm concentrating mostly on so getting it on television. That's one, because that'll get exposure more than the film festivals that we've shown at. And then 2, working on the Japanese market, which is what we're currently doing. And we're actually in talks specifically with a distributor. I can't name names here, but we are in talks right now to get it possibly a limited theatrical release there, and then also doing DVDs as well. But we're obviously in the process of negotiating
Ideally, as far as your involvement goes, like if you could have it your way, would you be involved in that part of that process at all?
I am involved in that part of the process, but
you want to be, you know what I mean?
Do I want to be?
Yeah. It seems like, you'd rather just, well, any creator would rather just create the content and just turn it loose and have somebody else.
I think there's definitely a part of that in me, for sure. It's a, I'm not cut out to be a producer, I don't think.
But you want to have a complete product, and
for sure,
in the end, you can market that.
Yeah, and I think it means a lot in the talks too, as well, to distributors, that the director is involved. It's not always the case, but at least in my experience, there seems to be an appreciation there. That if I'm involved, then there's like a personal stake here in the business negotiation.
But at some point, I assume you're like, I'm spending this time on this when this new passion's kind of taking over my wheelhouse. I want to keep, you know what I mean? Like I know how it is when you get something that gets in there, it's hard to get it out, and when something's pulling you away from it, it's nothing but frustrating to.
And once it gets out, you don't necessarily want it back.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I have to juggle so many things. I mean, that's one of the things that I've learned as a producer is like you have to really be focused on so many different things. But if you're in negotiations about one project for a distribution deal, and then the next day you spend your time on another project, developing it or whatever, but then you have to come back to the old project to do other negotiations or whatever, you just have to be able to adapt to that. I've learned that pretty much the hard way. My brother does it much better than I can.
Is that something you saw coming though? Like when you first wanted to start doing it, fell in love with it?
I had no idea how this worked.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I mean, I released my short film, and by released I mean I showed it at the a couple of film festivals. I had no idea what a feature what it entailed to make a feature film, let alone distribute it. Once the film festival circuit, which by the way for Between Tides, I think I mentioned earlier in the program, it lasted 2 years. So I'm going from place to place doing Q&A sessions. This is some of it was pre-pandemic. Doing Q&A sessions and whatever, and it's fun. You get to meet new people and whatever, and then the whole process comes to an end, and you're like, okay, on to the next thing. But then you're like, okay, well, this company is interested in distributing it. You should develop a strategy, or these producers are interested in coming on board your project after everything has been shown, or whatever. You just have to be really on your toes and just be like, oh wow, there are other opportunities here. It doesn't really stop at the film festival process,
and you have to be patient too, because that's seemingly to me a big part of the process as well.
Absolutely.
Trying to waiting for something to happen. Absolutely.
And I think I've learned the hard way, because I think there's a part of me, my brother's better at this. There's a part of me is like, oh, well, I'm gonna get to this next thing, and I become very impatient. But
you're an artist.
I mean, you can give whatever excuse to me, whatever you want. But yeah, it was really, 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 really hard. And to a certain degree, coming back to this, I love talking about this film, and I love sharing my experiences with, especially with people like you guys. And, I love doing that. And I think each time I do that, there's something new that I discover that I hadn't said before. And it's great. But it does bring you back to a certain state of mind, a certain experience that you've had, certain memories that you need to, keep, to bring up again. Yeah, it does seem somewhat sort of like you're going back in time and you're not moving forward. It can feel that way. But with distribution, for instance, there's new avenues, new ways of screening the film, new ways of showing the film, new audiences. So in that sense, it's really exciting, really exciting. So yeah, I think there are both like things that I really love about it and things that I wish I could not be a part of.
As with any passion.
Yeah.
How much do you nerd out on the tech side of it with, you know, the camera, with audio? Do you get deep dive nerdy into that?
I can get to be that way, but I'm not. I don't think I am as much as a lot of other people are. I love working with actors. So I am a documentarian, but the next project that I'm working on in Okinawa is going to be a feature film, a fiction, with actors. So I love working with actors, for instance.
That's awesome.
And I think that to me is my real passion, is to be able to work with actors and to, you know, mold a performance or whatever in front of a camera. I think the nerdy side of it, I definitely am. So right now, I don't know if I told you, but I am a video editor right now. I work for Universal Music in Hollywood, and we do like compliance edits. So like not the main edits for the music videos, because our content at Universal Music is mainly music videos. And so we do like compliance edits, which is like basically edits just before it gets published. So making sure that it's broadcast ready, or making sure that like certain curse words get taken out, that sort of thing. But I'm a video editor there, and I don't know, through that job, I've become a lot more technically inclined with the editing process. I've always been into cameras, nerding out on cameras for sure. But I don't think, compared to other people in my field, I don't think I am as nerdy.
Do you remember the first one you had, or the first one your dad had, or, you know, first one you really just messed around with, used? Was it like the old school VHS, like the big monster?
Yeah, I think it was my dad's camera so he had a VHS-C camera. You know, those like small VHS cassettes. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was the first camera, I think. And then my cousins had a High 8, which is actually even better than VHS-C. So and I remember on the High 8, actually, it's funny because like now you're jogging my memory now. I think as a 11-year-old or whatever, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, we actually made movies sort of like using our High 8, and we never had any sort of editing equipment or whatever. We tried to do it like with one take or whatever, like single tape. But
like Hitchcock rope.
Yeah,
we had buddies that did that. Ryan, our friend Andy, did that. He would run his
all the time
VCR and just do like hardcore edits with just the most rudimentary equipment ever.
All the time. We would climb roofs and just like get up on the top and just like do like one whole scene.
I think that, you know, just like in my experience, like I think that's like one of the best things about of that, like that's like one of the best activities I think you can do, because you know you're not going to get high quality, you know, audio or whatever, but you're doing it just because you're messing around, you're having fun or whatever, and you're truly enjoying it. And even if the final product is not this polished thing, like you can have so much fun with it, you know. When it gets to like,
I think we all want to create. Even
absolutely.
From a very young age, I know that's what I always wanted to do, and I know a lot, at least my two kids, absolutely, a lot of other people I know just want to create stuff, art, even if it's bad, it doesn't matter. It's
also nice though. We grew up in the 80s and all that shit wasn't uploaded to social media when we were, you know.
Very true. I mean, nowadays with kids, you know, you can take just like a phone, you know, and create like incredibly high quality, incredibly high quality stuff. You can edit on your phone.
Yeah, my kids are like super good at editing with their phone. They're making like weird TikTok edits and
absolutely.
Well, I mean, major late night programs now. I think Colbert or Seth Meyers or one of the two has a whole Samsung thing where you send in the video and you make a movie on your new Samsung 7 or whatever it happens to be.
Right. So we didn't have, growing up, we didn't have that technology, but you know, you make do with whatever you have. And I don't know. I think actually there's more enjoyment there, because you can go back years later and look at like the crappy job that you did, you know. But I you know, I think that's, I think that's maybe where I really found the fun of it. You know, it's not just in the recording aspect of it, but the performing aspect of it. I think as a kid, I think I really, 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 really enjoyed. I really enjoyed doing that in front of a camera from a very early age.
That's awesome. What would be your ideal situation currently if you weren't editing? I assume it's a 9-to-5 style situation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your ideal lifestyle would consist of.
Well, if I were to be able to, so I make movies that don't really make money, but if I were to be able to live off of what I make, yeah, that would be the ideal lifestyle, is to do these projects, to make enough to be able to live off of it, and then in the interim create, develop, pitch, get the project greenlit, get funding,
create your own movies from beginning to end.
Absolutely, to do it full time. I think another ideal, and this is probably a little bit more realistic, is to be able to teach. I love teaching. So teaching film,
Wow.
young filmmakers how to make movies, how to make documentaries.
Special talent teaching.
Yeah, it is a hard job, and
I'm glad you have a passion for it, because a lot of artists don't.
For sure. It's true. My dad's a teacher. He's a English and American literature professor in college, and then he taught English as well. But he and my mom were both educators. I think they had a lot of influence on me, and I think teaching as a profession is incredibly hard. It can be tough to make. To be a lucrative profession, but it can also be very rewarding because you have all these students who go on and do things that are great.
Your dad fascinated me, by the way. I was watching one of the Q&As with him, and him talking about how his interest started peaking with the Bonnet Islands through a poet that spent some time there.
Exactly.
Like, it's on my to-do list to do a deep dive into that.
For sure. It's really fascinating stuff, actually, his research. But yeah, he that's how it got started. That's how this whole Chichijima thing started. He's a professor. His research was on this Japanese poet named Kitara Hakushu. And Hakushu spent like a month or something in Chichijima. It wasn't even that long. And because he spent a month there, my dad's like, oh, well, he spent a month there. I want to know why he found the place fascinating. I want to go down there. And then when he went down, he went with my mom, and they met our other producer, Danny Long, and then met a bunch of people, the Bonin Islanders on the island. And then he called me so excited. He's like, look, you wouldn't believe what I saw and what I experienced and who I met, because this is just really fascinating. I'm sure you would love it. Yeah. And he was right. He was very right.
Danny Long too has very interesting background. It sounds like.
Yep. Professor of linguistics at Tokyo Metropolitan University. He's the one who spent quite a bit of time on the island. Decades of research doing linguistics, because the people on the Bonin Islands obviously spoke this sort of Creole, this mixed language. So that was his field. So he'd been involved with the community and involved with the research much longer than any of us. So his contacts really served to kind of catapult, or to start the project. It was because of him that we were able to. Danny Long's my other. So
okay.
Charles is my dad. My dad, yeah. He's the other producer.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, it's all right. But it was because of Danny Long that we were able to establish the contacts, and that's what really sort of moved the project forward. Without that, the project wouldn't have happened, for sure.
And that's what kind of bothers me. It seems like someone like Danny, who has been a lifelong academic, he obviously did a lot of his research, I would assume, with some grants, with some funding through education. Mm-hmm. Why is that not a thing for filmmakers? Why aren't these same type of grants available for the arts the same way they are for these very specific, fields? Because to me, it's just the same kind of research studies. You know what I mean? It has the same value.
Right. I think in the Japanese context, it's there aren't that many grants in film to begin with. It's just in Japan. I'm not talking about in the United States, in Japan. And so a lot of the grants that academics get are very different, and they're in like a different process or whatever. Fortunately, I was able to take advantage of that because, you know, this was academically funded. This project was academically funded. So, but with filmmaker grants in the States, you know, they are available. But you're right. The arts in general don't get enough money.
Yeah.
That it's true, and I think how, for instance, the sciences, you know, are you know, get, you know, millions and millions of dollars to fund research into medicine or
It
into
seems
any
like
sort
there's a
of,
lot of control behind that, though, where they end up, you know, it's a trickle up situation where the control of the um, product itself trickles up and away from the actual researcher, as you know, and these grants are used as basically funding tools to fund their own private gain, if that makes sense. You know, they're
yeah, I think so. And there's you know, an interest in, yeah, like you said, like there's an interest to there's a sort of a payoff there because they can, you know,
right.
this research is used for certain, you know, commercial gains.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the arts, you know, it's I mean, there's a commercial aspect to the arts too, obviously, but it doesn't have the sort of same yield that the sciences do. So I think there's a major difference
And I would
in
assume
terms
the
of
last thing
grants.
like a major film organization wants to admit is, you know, they're giving money to other filmmakers to do projects because they don't, you know, it's not under their creative endeavors to do their.
Yeah, and I think that's why now the grants are largely like culturally based too. So like if you have an Asian American film, for instance, Asian American organizations can give you grants, and then, you know, that's a very common approach. It's been, you know, it's been like that for many years. So I think that there's that angle of it, and I'm still learning. I'm definitely still learning how to get grants and funds.
Sure.
And I think that's where my focus is on, and especially because the Between Tides also garnered more attention within the Asian American community, and at Asian American themed film festivals. So you know, I feel like I'm very much part of that community now. A lot of the people that I met there who supported the movie are part of the are part of the Asian American community, and I think I feel like I can get support, funding, including funding from those organizations.
That's great.
So,
did you have any questions? I'm sorry, Jess. I just over talked you a bunch.
Can a lot of people on the island speak English?
I think so. I think the generation, like your mom's generation, and maybe a little younger can, but for the most part, no. The islands, what's really a travesty is that even the history is not really taught. The kids nowadays, and there's obviously an elementary school, like there's a kindergarten, elementary school, junior high. There's now even a high school. It's all the part of the Japanese Ministry of Education curriculum, which means that there really isn't a path forward for people who really want to be fluent in English. So no, not many people growing up can, but there are the families, you know, obviously there's like people like your mom still living on the island, and their kids may be able to speak some English, I to varying degrees. You know, I can't say for certain, you know, they have a, you know, certain kind of level of understanding of English, because everybody is different there. I think that depended on whether their families were more open about their experiences or not, whether their families wanted their kids to share the history, whether they wanted them to, you know, to a certain degree, adopt, excuse me, the kind of cultural things that their parents had. So I think each family is very unique and different. So I would say, to answer your question, yes, there are some families who speak it. Even people our generation who can speak it, yes, but there aren't that many.
See, we'd struggle there.
Well, I mean, No, but okay, but this is what would happen. This is what would happen if you guys took a boat. Let's just say it's just you two, okay? You guys took a boat. You'd be welcomed. And I can say this for certain. You'd be welcomed by the entire community. The people who hear about you coming and visiting for the first time, you'd be welcomed. Obviously, there'd be, people who were take you around the island, meeting all your relatives. You guys would be taken care of. I'm sure that would not be an issue at all. So I don't know if that's actually, sorry, I just assumed that maybe that's where your head was going in terms of like,
we need to go.
but honestly, you guys being family, I mean, it wouldn't be an issue at all.
2024.
Next year, maybe 2022.
Yes, I'm down.
But I've seen pictures of the little cemetery that they have.
Yeah, I didn't put that in the movie, but it's fascinating. That cemetery is really fascinating.
Grandpa's buried there, right?
Yeah, both of my grandparents are there, and I know my mom I had a brother that passed away, and he's buried there.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, if you have, you should definitely go. It's such a fascinating place with its own history. I have to admit, because you mentioned the cemetery, there is a quality to Chichijima that is a little spiritual, and not a little. It's very spiritual, and it's kind of spooky.
Like Buddhist, or it's not like Zen Buddhism. Or
no. The families were Episcopalian. They like at various points they were Catholic. They're also all denominations of, or not all, but like various denominations of Christianity. So largely the cemetery reflects this because there are crosses on tombstones, for instance. But it's fascinating. It's spooky in a way that is, I think that there's such a quality to being in Chichijima. It's a mysterious place. There's this like jungle, like it's just it can get kind of like, and it has all these like stories like of atrocities during the war. I mean, there's a whole other side of history that's not really necessarily related to the Bonin Island.
HW.
H.W. Bush, exactly, who crash landed there.
The rest of his party might have been eaten.
Exactly. There's that history where might have been cannibalism, or not might have been, there was cannibalism. But atrocities, war crimes committed by Japanese soldiers. There's it's a really hard history to take, but so there's a spooky side to it, but it's also like in Japanese that this is what a lot of people say, because people find the place so incredibly energizing and spiritually awakening. In Japanese they say Ogasawara magic, so that's Ogasawara magic in Japanese, and there's a really an amazing quality to your experience. Like you just go there and you feel like you're in a place that can't be replicated anywhere. You're having an experience that can't be replicated anywhere else in the world.
Leonardo DiCaprio's The Beach feeling.
Yeah, to use an analogy.
A lot of people, I think in this day and age right now, I mean, especially post-pandemic, but I think it was a trend before with whatever, but they crave that kind of experience.
Absolutely.
They individually, we crave this experience of, this is unique.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I said earlier. We were looking on a Google image, Google Earth just about an hour ago, and my first thought was, I just want to be here with no shoes on and my fat gut being burnt in the sun and just no worries in the world.
It's like your foot hits a clam and you break it open.
It really felt like there was a lot of peace just looking at it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It is that kind of place, and there's a lot of freedom. It's one of the rare places in Japan, for instance, where islanders, local residents, would call each other by their first name. And I know that doesn't, from an American perspective, that doesn't seem revolutionary, but in Japan, typically you call people by their last name. You're not on a first name basis. You're on a first name basis with family or maybe very close friends. That's it. Most people, you call by their last name, and that's normal. But not on the island. Island people, the people, who transplanted there, people who were born and raised there, it doesn't matter. People call each other by their first names, and it's amazing to see.
Do you find the pace just of life in general slower? And
yes, slower. There is like a Japanese side to it that's, maybe a little formal.
I'm going there.
But
Google images, everyone.
but I think it's a lot slower than mainland Japan, and I love it. I enjoy it every time I go there. I contemplated about permanently settling down there at one point, but yeah,
I've often mentioned that to her. It's like, we both work remotely. I've been working remotely for a couple of years now, since pre-pandemic. So it's been a normal thing for me. We have no physical tether, other than children. They learn virtually now anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a hard press argument not to just take a big jump like that and go, why don't we live there? Why don't we just go spend a few weeks or a month there? And
at the very least, you should do the latter. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say the exact same, Justin. I mean, you and Jess, and at least just you and Jess, you have to go there.
Yeah, pandemic has really made me, once the kids got settled with learning virtually, it's like, we should just sell the house and buy a sweet ass RV and travel nonstop, because there's nothing.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are doing that.
Yeah, I envy that a little bit. It'd be nice to. Then it's like, oh yeah, there's people out there. I don't want to be. I don't want people breathing near me. I gotta stay here.
Yeah,
well, that's why you got the RV. I mean,
yeah, but even then, you gotta empty the pooper.
Oh, that's fine. I can deal with that shit.
She's got enough relatives on the West Coast, Seattle. Where's
California.
California. So Liz and Sean are where in Seattle, or
Liz is in California, and then Sean and Michi are in Washington.
Washington, yeah.
Where are they in Washington?
Near Seattle, I believe.
I think they're in Everett, Washington.
Yes.
Oh, in Everett. Okay.
Everett. That's Brett Weinstein. Everett College there. That was, I don't know if you remember Brett Weinstein. He was a professor at, it was Evergreen. It was Evergreen.
Evergreen?
Yeah. A lot of that, there was a huge controversy that went on there. Campus.
Yeah, it's a famous school. I've heard of Evergreen.
Super progressive.
Okay, yeah, that's why.
Washington State is just so. I mean, I'm in Colorado. Sorry to interject, but Rocky Mountain's my favorite national park, obviously.
Yeah.
But still, Olympic is my second. I love going to Olympic. I love seeing the Penn. Port Townsend.
Charlie.
Nice.
Charlie needs tape, so
he's the best hair.
And retrieving tape. He's like, I need help with the tape because I want to kill himself.
He's fixing stuff. Let him do his thing.
That's so cute.
I just need some tape, Dad.
Yeah.
Speaking of national parks, the Bonin Islands are now part of like a world recognized.
Yes.
Like heritage.
What's the name of it?
Site?
World Heritage. It's a World Heritage.
Oh
site.
yeah.
That is very true, and I explore some of it in the documentary. Obviously, it was a take that the people that I interviewed had when it first became a World Heritage site. So they may have different opinions now. It's been obviously a few years since it got designated a World Heritage site. So I don't know how it's going, to be honest. I haven't really kept up with the news in regards to that. So,
I mean, that's like is Japanese? Was that an issue by the parliament, or is it a parliament? I don't even know.
No, it's UNESCO. So part of the
yeah. So UNESCO, so World Heritage Site.
Yeah.
Like, how is that governed? I mean,
I don't know.
I assume it's focused on wildlife and nature preserve type situations. Fishing, a lot of fishing, regulations.
It is, but in the context of globalization, like how is that actually governed? Like, I mean, who?
I don't know. That's a deep dive on its own, I'm
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm gonna deep dive that.
sure.
Not now, but
By the way, Ryan, your kids are really cute.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
They are my joy.
So we have four, but they all have I would say your traditional Asian, eye. Like you can very clearly see the
I would
genetics
say that too. Yeah.
there.
But they don't get asked because I've
No.
asked them, has anybody ever asked you?
That's interesting.
From?
So they're skewing more towards the white side of the family.
Yeah.
Then they all have red hair like that she does, which is strange. Her mom is jet black hair, her sister jet black hair. She got this red hair gene, so I think that really
Wow.
with the kids kind of.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought so too. You would think that black would be dominant over red, but my dad has red
I
hair.
would. Your dad has what?
My dad has red hair, so that's where I got mine.
I see. Oh, I see. That's really cool. I wish I had lighter hair. I did when I was a kid. When photos as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, I had extremely light brown hair. But obviously that's changed. Now it's not black, but it's pretty dark.
Beautiful.
Brown. Oh, thanks.
I have no hair, so
What?
no. Your hair looks fantastic.
As parents of kids who have this kind of background in their, what we obviously want to encourage. Like I want them to, when they fill out any applications and when they fill out any, I want them to.
That's a big problem
acknowledge
right now.
that side.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's even almost, as an English mutt who's, has no proud history of anything. We're just Irish moonshiners from, it's pretty sad.
I'm German Irish
there, but, I want them to be super proud of it. I want them to claim as much as they're, willing to claim, but I don't want to force that onto them or, tell them that's how they should identify with themselves. It's a very weird line of, there are benefits to, acknowledging it, financial aid wise, things like that. But, it's hard for me to just say you are this or you should identify this way. You know what I mean? It's a weird line.
I completely sympathize. I mean, I don't have kids myself, but I sympathize with that. I think it's not an easy thing, and I think each family should have a very unique approach to their kids because their kids respond in very different ways. I don't have any recommendations or suggestions other than, to have it develop organically. You definitely can't force it on them. If they're not interested, you can't make them interested by saying that this is part of who you are. You just can't do that. Having said that, though, you can maximize exposure. I think that's another reason why I would recommend, taking the family to Chichijima. And who knows? There could be, you have 4 kids, right? So there could be 2 kids who express a major interest and the other 2 don't. Or that maybe one's lukewarm and the other one's like totally disinterested. I don't know what it is. But if you maximize the exposure, the chances of them as an adult being like, well, this is where, mommy's family's from. Sorry, I said mommy. Like my mom, as a grown adult, they would say mommy. No, I'm kidding. This is where mom's family's from. I would like to go again or go there for the first time or whatever the situation is. Or I would like to learn Japanese in college, for instance. That's a very common scenario. I even talked to some families at the reunion that fortunately I was able to attend a couple of Chichijima reunions in Las Vegas. And I talked to some younger generations who were very much interested in why I was doing the project or, whatever. But I've talked to younger generations who were like, I'm so fascinated by this place. I've never been, but I want to know more about the history. I mean, your kids could definitely develop that. But some of them may not, and I think with any identity, not just a Chichijiman identity or Bonin Islander identity, but any identity, to a certain degree, the parents can do a lot for sure, language wise or whatever. Yeah, they can do a lot, but to a certain degree, you're going to be limited to what the child wants and how they navigate their lives. And they could not develop that interest at all. And I think you have to be resigned to that, or you have to resign sounds negative. Sorry. I think you have to accept that reality.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of exciting things on my side of the family history. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
so
I identify with that too, because my part of me, so my last name is Fox, but it's actually German. So there's a German side to my family, which I only recently found. I think 2013 was when I actually found out I was actually German. I literally thought I was English or French or a mutt of European cultures, right. But that's when and you know, to be honest, I wasn't really interested in my white side. Yeah, I knew that we came from backwoods Tennessee, you know, things like that. And, you know, we were, you know, for lack of a better phrase, white trash. And we were poor. And my grandmother on my dad's side was an illegitimate child, for instance, you know, things like that, which is like anecdotes, you know, I knew all that, but it didn't really excite me or interest me. Like most of the excitement for me was either my Japanese side, which came from farmers and rice farmers, and you know, or the fact that I was mixed race. So it was like very immediate, like, oh, it's just me that's like, you know, my combination that's interesting or something, you know, like that was my take. You know, it sounds kind of conceited, but it was, you know, that was kind of like how I was.
I love catching moments when, like with Kiyomi, especially when they're around Kiyomi, like seeing naturally come out of her. Like the woman can clean a fish like nobody's business. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, a lot of islanders can. That's the thing.
Just being out camping or fishing with them, and you know, it's grandma and grandpa to them, but grandma's really showing up grandpa how to clean a bluegill. You know what I mean? Like
that's amazing. I would love to. I wish I could capture something like that on video.
And it's funny, we call it. His name's Bill. I call him Bluegill Bill. But when it comes to cleaning fish, her mom is. I've never seen anything like it, but
yeah,
little things like that. You see that history come out of her, and the kids notice it, and it blows my mind. It's so
awesome. I mean, no, that's great. That's really heart warming to hear. Really, that you know, and I can see the passion in you, Justin. Like, you know, it's great. I mean, I'm just assuming a lot here because I don't know you guys well, but it must, you know, it's nice that you're really interested in Jess's family's, you know, history, and that you're like, you know, part of the reason why maybe your kids can have the memories that may be lost otherwise, you know. You know, obviously, I'm sorry, I'm narrating here. I don't know your specific family situation at all, but
22 years together. Her parents are more my parents than they are hers.
What you just said was beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
I mean, they're my mom and dad too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I don't know if this is something that really interests you. So that part of me that I haven't mentioned, I know we've talked for so long, but
I apologize too. We
don't. No, it's okay.
We're a long form podcast.
Is that I was actually married, and I'm divorced now, but I know how that. Yeah, I know how that goes when you marry into a family, and they adopt you, and you feel like your interests and your identity all like shifts, and you know, you become very invested in these family members. They're not, you know, related to you by blood, but they're obviously related to you through your wife. And you know, I know how that goes. So you know, it's another reason why I'm really amazed at the passion that you're really expressing. So, you know, kudos to you for doing that, and to have that interest. And I'm sure it's going to mean a lot. I'm sure it's going to mean a lot to your kids down the line.
I hope so.
Yeah.
That's the goal anyway. You know what I mean? That's good.
Well, I mean, you guys are some of the most amazing parents I know. So.
Oh. We try, man. You know what I mean?
I mean, truly, you are.
One of those like exposing to as much information and knowledge as possible kind of thing. And if it happens pertain to their own history,
we have big brains. Let us decide.
Yeah.
But the kids don't get asked if they're Asian, but when they see me, they always ask my kids, "Where's your mom from?" Like,
yeah. I see.
Ask them where they're. Yeah, her mom is.
Yeah. I mean, I know this podcast, has a time limit, but if I ever were to meet you guys, all of you guys, but I would love to talk more about, your, especially you, I'm be very curious, like your experience growing up in Indiana and stuff. Maybe there are some things that's really hard to share or whatever. And for me too, believe me, growing up in Japan
it's never felt like I fit in because I was different and there were never any Asian kids around. So.
Right. And for me, there weren't any white kids around. I had the flipped experience, in Japan. Going to public school in Japan was probably one of the hardest things. I am writing about this, and eventually I'm hoping to get it published. But growing up not just as somebody who's part white, who's seen as wholly white, but also as a twin. And there's two of us. Attracting unwanted attention constantly, right. being bullied and picked on. I mean, these are all, not being able to fit in. These are all sort of experiences that I've had. I tried to sort of relate to the Islanders, in that sort of way, but obviously it's not completely similar. But there's a whole side of me that I feel like I could also share with you guys as well. So, it's at some point when it's safe, I would love to meet you guys.
I would enjoy nothing more, honestly.
You see that in movies. You see culturally, you've seen the black student displaced into a white school. You've seen the white student displaced into a black community. Yeah. But you don't see the displaced Asian or the displaced, white American into an Asian culture.
Right.
It's weird that those others have been acceptable and just reuse formats.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's why I think it's more or less our time right now to be able to share that and to be able to create art, movies, music, whatever it is, essays, whatever it is, and to share them. Because I think there's so much interest now in the wake of Black Lives Matter. But, I think in general, look at the kind of Asian hate that is going on right now with the pandemic. I think it's more or less our time to be able to share these things.
Because I wonder if that's really ultimately a product of like globalization in a sense, but also multiculturalism. Mm-hmm. And like we are all part of many different things. And it's not fair to assume like nationalism makes no sense in the context of today's political environment or scientific environment.
Yeah.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot in the context of globalism, like a lot of what we saw in terms of like, movies or music, let's say, pre 2015 or whatever, a lot of it was, dictated by what was like politically relevant or what was commercially viable or whatever. But I think now we're coming to a point where even the commercially unviable projects, something that is not going to make money, is going to get some interest because there is an audience out there. And I think social media has helped. And social media has helped with that.
And small-time film festivals.
Definitely.
Fringe festivals. I've played many
grassroots organizations, trying to get artists' work out there, et cetera. I think there's so much mobility right now. I think it might not make us a lot of money, but exposure is definitely a lot of it. And so if there's a platform out there, there's going to be a way.
But there does come a line. When someone tells you this is for exposure, there's one finger I want to throw up, and I'm just like, no, I've been working at this a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, man, I don't want to keep you. I know we're up 2.5.
No, I'm glad to talk with you guys. This is definitely one of my, to be able to share is definitely a passion that I have. So, not just my own experiences, but experience of the Islanders that I was fortunate to meet.
There's so many people that that I would love to talk to. So anytime you want to do this again, I would love to talk. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely. Keep me posted. I work obviously with a twin brother who also has a separate identity and separate experience.
That's awesome.
Let's keep in touch and. Whatever I can do to help you guys, if you need anything, just let me know.
Well, I want to hear about
we can use some video editing tips. That's for sure.
Probably.
It's not my world, man. That's so hard.
It is. I mean, also podcast is very, very specific format. So it's hard. But you guys ask good questions and and if you have if you want me on the show again, just let me know.
I love it.
Glad.
Can you send me another link to Between Tides?
Yes, I will send you another link to Between Tides, and I'll send you a link to It Ain't Necessarily So.
Oh yes, please do. Yeah. I cannot wait to see that. Yeah. And also, if you have any suggestions for other people that might want to talk to us, I mean, we'd love to hear anyone that you're working with, or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Not necessarily your brother, but
no, definitely, absolutely. I'll keep you guys. I'll have to think about it, but I know some people. So
awesome. Appreciate it immensely, man.
I love your movie. Thank
you. Thank you. Thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. Thank you.
A lot of things that I didn't know, and
that's good. I appreciate
it's golden.
Thanks.
All right, man. You have a wonderful evening. It's a pleasure talking to you.
You too, sir.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Bye.